Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. More particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado and Fiji Island, in Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and also to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings, and may the good Lord bless you, my brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 22 on the subject, the 12 figurative months. And we already proven with absolute facts that the 12 figurative months are closely connected to the subject, the 12-month parabolic harvest period, as stated, Shepherd's Rod, track number 5, page 74. And also to the subject, the 40 typical days, or the focal point of the subject, the 12 figurative months, is concerning the ingathering of the first fruits, which is found in the period of the 5 symbolical months. So reading again in track number 5, page 74. In track number 3, the harvest, the time from the baptism of Christ to the close of provision, is shown to be illustrated by 12 figurative months. 6 from Christ's baptism to his crucifixion. 5 from the crucifixion to the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000. Revelation 14 verse 4. Leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. Revelation 7 verse 9. So concerning the subject, the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000, it is connected to the subject, the wave shape, and the wave lobes. As stated in the subject, the harvest. And concerning such subject, the wave sheep and the wave lobes, it is closely connected to Revelation 6 verse 6. And the subject, the 40 typical days, the wave sheep and the wave lobes, there are two grains. And in the subject of Revelation 6 verse 6, there are two cereals. And this subject is also connected with the subject from Christ's resurrection to his ascension, the 40 typical days. So if we could be able to give the full explanation concerning the 40 typical days and the 12 months parabolic harvest period and the 12 figurative months in perfect harmony, then without any doubts, this is the appointed time that had been predicted by B.T. Hockett. So, let us connect our subject to that point in the writings of B.T. Hockett, by which he had not been able to completely harmonize that according to him, it seems there is a disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages. So, let us read this statement in 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 11. It says, now the only disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages on this subject is that the desire of ages says that on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. The Desire of Ages, page 77, which places the first feast of the Passover on the Sabbath. Numbers 28, verse 17, thus making the slaying of the lamb in the 14th day, Exodus 12, verse 6, fall on Friday. Whereas the shepherd's rod places the slaying of the lamb and the 14th day on Wednesday. The first feast on Thursday, the second feast on Friday, and so on. Therefore, in view of the fact that the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages are here at variance, that we believe both to be inspired, we must necessarily go to the Bible to prove which is the correct day and how to harmonize the two volumes. Thus, laying aside both the shepherd's rod and the desire of ages, we go for witnesses to Mark and John. 3 Symbolic Code 8 to 10, page 11. Now let us compare the 2 month of April. Please project April pattern number 6, and then the opposite side, April pattern number 2. So, so that we could be able to view that statement in 3 Symbolic Code. April pattern number 6, and the other one is April pattern number 2. This is pattern number 6. And this one is pattern number 2. Let us place pattern number 6 and then pattern number 2. This is the year by which Jesus Christ was crucified and resurrected, by which the Passover day fall on Wednesday, according to the shepherd's rod. Let us read 2SR on page 23. The 14th day of the first month that year was on Wednesday. 2SR page 23. So, this is the pattern of the Bible calendar on 31 AD, the year of crucifixion and resurrection. And Jesus Christ was resurrected on the 4th day of the feast. This is the first day, then the second day, Friday, the third day, Saturday. Therefore, Jesus Christ was resurrected on the 4th day of the feast. But this is the statement in Desire of Ages, page 77, by which the sheep is offered on the second day of the feast, by which in reality, that is the very words of the Bible. Tomorrow after the Sabbath. Plainly indicating that April 15th must be Saturday. So, this statement in the Bible in Leviticus 23, verse 10 and 11, it says, let's read Leviticus 23, verse 9, verse 10 and 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye become into the land which I gave unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. the priest shall waive it. This verse saying, on the morrow after the Sabbath, must be directly applied to pattern number 2. But it is indirectly applied to pattern number 1, pattern number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because the statement on the morrow after the Sabbath indicating that April 15 is Friday. April 15 is Sabbath. And that is the first day of the feast. And that is the reason why the Desire of Ages says on the second day of the feast. Now, in the first section of the Exodus, under the leadership of Moses, there are only 3 celebrations of the Passover. First, while they were in Egypt, and the 2, while they were already in the wilderness. By which, after the 2 celebration of the Passover feast in the wilderness, they were no longer allowed by God to observe the Passover feast because of their rebellion at Kadesh. So, let us read again the statement in Patriarchs and Prophets 406. For nearly 40 years, the children of Israel are lost to view in the obscurity of the desert. The space, says Moses, in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Sird was 30 and 80 years. So, 40 minus 38 equals 2. So, there are 2 years by which they celebrated the Passover in Egypt, in wilderness rather, after they came out from Egypt. Then it says, during these years, the people were constantly reminded that we were under the divine rebuke. In the rebellion at Kadesh, they had rejected God, and God had for the time rejected them. Since they had proved unfaithful to His covenant, they were not to receive the sign of the covenant, the rite of circumcision. Their desire to return to the land of slavery had shown them to be unworthy of freedom, and the ordinance of the Passover, instituted to commemorate the deliverance from bondage, was not to be observed. So, they were prohibited. They were no longer allowed to observe the ordinance of the Passover. Now, here in 485 in Patriarchs and Prophets, a short distance from Jordan, the Hebrews made their first encampment in Canaan. Here Joshua circumcised the children of Israel, and the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and keep the Passover. And on page 613, the same book, Patriarchs and Prophets, it says, Gilgal had been the place of Israel's first encampment in the Promised Land. It was here that Joshua, by divine direction, set up the pillar of 12 stones to commemorate the miraculous passage of the Jordan. Here circumcision had been renewed Here they had kept the first Passover after the sin at Kadesh and the desert sojourn. So, Patriarchs and Prophets 613. So that is the history. So, let us place in according to 1SR. I would like to read first. 1SR 114 and 115. The prophecy made to Abraham of 430 years ended at the time the children of Israel went out of Egypt, which is according to Bible chronology, King James Version, 1491 BC. So that is very plain. They came out from Egypt 1491 BC. And we know that King James Version is dependable, according to 2SR 118. And also in 3 Symbolic Code number 7, page 4, that the King James Version is dependable. And as a matter of fact, since it was quoted by the shepherd's rod, placed in the golden bowl, then 100%, this must be absolutely perfect. 1491 BC, the very year when ancient Israel went out of Egypt, that is pattern number 4. So let us place now 3 April in under the leadership of Moses. Pattern number 4, 5, and 6. So the 3 April 1491 BC, 1490, and 1489 BC. So okay. So this is pattern number 4. Pattern number 4, pattern number 5, pattern number 6. This is 1491 BC, 1490, and 1489 BC. So this is pattern number 4, pattern number 5, pattern number 6. And this is 1491 BC, 1490, then 1489. So this is the Passover week when they were in Egypt, the last April in the land of Egypt. So April 14 fall on Thursday. So it was on Thursday midnight that the slaughtering of all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt. And this is the first Passover while they were already in the wilderness. Pattern number 5, by which the wave sheep must be offered on the 7th day of the feast. Then the last Passover that they celebrated under the leadership of Moses is pattern number 6. The very pattern by which Jesus Christ also crucified and resurrected. Pattern number 6, the same pattern. But according to the spirit of prophecy as recorded in the Bible, after this celebration in 1489 BC, they were no longer allowed to observe such ordinance. And they began to observe the Passover after Moses died. And the very first year of the leadership of Joshua, the second section of the movement, then we need to subtract 1491 minus 40 minus 40, and that is 1451 BC. So in 1451 BC, let us look at our table chart to find out what pattern, Bible pattern, 1451 BC. So in this table chart, 1451 BC, so you see pattern number 2. Pattern number 2, 1451 BC. And that is the pattern by which on the morrow after the Sabbath. So, in that occurrences, we can easily discern that God knoweth beforehand that when they will enter the land, that is pattern number 2. So Leviticus 23, verse 9, 10, and 11, it is a protection. And with admonition. It says here in Leviticus 23, verse 9, 10, and 11, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye be come into the land which I gave unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. And that was in 1451 BC, when they entered into the land. And according to our reading in Patriarchs and Prophets, 485 and 613, that is the time by which they observed the Passover, the first Passover after they had been prohibited by God not to observe it because of the rebellion in Kadesh Barnea. Now here in Joshua chapter 5, on verse 8 to verse 11, I would like to read first. the statement in 1888 message. It says here, one other text, if anyone were needed to settle the fact. So that's the statement. It is from General Conference Daily Bulletin by A.T. Jones, March 7, 1897. One other text, if anyone were needed to settle the fact that Israel did not get out of Egypt as long as they were in the wilderness, is found in the book of Joshua. You remember the passage, after they had crossed Jordan, then they were circumcised, it is written, this day have I ruled away the reproach of Egypt from of you. And that is found on verse 9 on chapter 5. In Joshua chapter 5. Saying, verse 9, chapter 5, and the Lord said unto Joshua, this day have I ruled away the reproach of Egypt from of you. Wherefore the name of the place is called Gilgal unto this day. And the children of Israel encamp in Gilgal and keep the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. Now let us read again the statement. It says, in the writings of Alonzo Jones, this day have I ruled away the reproach of Egypt from of you. Those people you see who left Egypt never got out of Egypt till they had crossed Jordan. For not until then was the reproach of Egypt taken away. Then they were all converted men. That whole nation crossed Jordan by faith. It was a nation that believed God, and there was not a dissenting voice nor a doubting thought. Then they were out of Egypt. Thus you see that it is perfectly evident that spiritual Egypt is the literal Egypt of the Bible. So that is the statement. So the same with the statement in 1 TG. Number 7. On page 10 and 11, it says, and in order, 1 TG number 7, page 10 and 11, and in order to salvage the youth, or to rescue, salvage meaning to rescue, God had to bury all their murmuring parents, except the two faithful, trusting men who protested against the evil report of the other 10 spies. Mark you, every adult that left Egypt, except Caleb and Joshua, had to be buried before the youth could cross to Jordan. Why? Because though God did take them with ease out of Egypt, He could not get Egypt out of them. 1 TG number 7, page 10 and 11. And we know that the message or the vision of Sister White, I think that is in Testimonies volume 1, saying that you think that it is a strange thing that ancient Israel, when they murmured in the wilderness. I would like to read Testimonies for the Church, volume 1. (128) and 129. I was pointed back to the children of Israel after they left Egypt. Testimonies, Volume 1, 128 and 129. I was pointed back to the children of Israel after they left Egypt. God in mercy called them out from the Egyptians that they might worship Him without hindrance or restraint. He wrought for them in the way by miracles. He proved and tried them by bringing them into straight places. After the wonderful dealings of God with them and their deliverance so many times, they murmured when tried or proved by Him. Their language was, "Would to God we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt." They lusted for the leeks and onions there. I saw that many who profess to believe the truth for these last days think it strange that the children of Israel murmured as they journeyed, that after the wonderful dealings of God with them, they should be so ungrateful as to forget what He hath done for them. But say the angel, "Ye have done worse than they." So, modern Israel, in reality, they have done worse than the children of Israel, ancient Israel, because we have already their examples, but many have not been profited by such examples. And in the vision of the prophet, in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, 533, it says, Volume 1, 533, I was shown many things concerning the people of God in connection with this work for these last days. I saw that many professed Sabbath keepers will come short of everlasting life. They fail to take warning from the first pursued by the children of Israel and fall into some of their evil ways. If they continue in these sins, they will fall like the Israelites and never enter the heavenly Canaan. Now all these things happen unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. So, that is very plain in Testimonies for the Church. Volume 1, 533. Many professed Sabbath keepers will come short of everlasting life. Because the same with the ancient Israel, brothers and sisters, they followed the course pursued by ancient Israel. I would like to read this reading in Testimonies, Volume 2. It says here that, saying, and Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, by which the prophet says, according to her vision, just a small portion, 445. In Volume 2, it says, I have tried in the fear of God to set before His people their danger and their sins, and have endeavored to the best of my feeble powers to arouse them. I have stated startling things which, if they had believed, would have caused them distress and terror, and lead them to zeal in repenting of their sins and iniquities. I have stated before them that from what was shown me, but a small number of those now professing to believe the truth would eventually be saved. Not because they could not be saved, but because they would not be saved in God's own appointed way. So there is God's own appointed way of salvation. And that is through the gospel. By accepting the gospel. And that gospel is the present truth. So the statement in 2SR 266 saying, only by the gospel proclamation, through that spiritual house, can God save His people. Now let us go back to our subject. To repeat again, there are two statements in the spirit of prophecy by which the thought is the same. On the second day of the feast, and Hotep had not been able to explain in its fullness concerning the statement recorded in the spirit of prophecy. And the first one is found in Desire of Ages, page 77, and the other is in Patriarchs and Prophets, 539. So let us read one symbolic code number 6, page 7. In reference to the question as to how can we harmonize the statement on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest were presented before God, Patriarchs and Prophets, 539. With a statement, the sheep offering was to be offered before the Lord on the morrow after the Sabbath. The Shepherd's Rod, Volume 2, page 20. We answer as follows. The fact that the author says, on the day the Passover was eaten, he was to be sacrificed, proves that she does not mean the second day from the feast which Jesus celebrated, but rather from the Paschal feast on Friday night, which actually falls on the Sabbath. For the Passover on Friday, before he was crucified, the second day of the feast would not fall on Sunday, but rather on the Sabbath. And as her position is that Christ arose on Sunday, on the day the sheep was offered, Desire of Ages 785, it is evident that the statement in Patriarchs and Prophets must be understood to refer to another than the second day from the first feast, the real Passover. In other words, if she means that which seems to appear on the face of it, the second day of the feast, according to what she has written elsewhere, would fall on the seventh day Sabbath instead on the day of the resurrection took place. Page 6 of this issue is answering a question in regards to the length of time from the day Jesus ate the Passover to the crucifixion. Proves that he ate the Passover feast with the 12 on Wednesday night, and that he was resurrected on Sunday morning. That is on the day the sheep was to be presented before the Lord. This proves that the words on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, were presented before God, could not mean the day after Jesus ate the Passover. However, thus far we are not able to give a better explanation of Patriarchs and Prophets 539. Nevertheless, the facts herein prove the Shepherd's Rod correct. So, that is the statement in one symbolic code number 6, page 7. And the only answer that we can give why B.T. Hotep had not been able to give better explanation, according to 1SR page 13, the answer we give is because it was not present truth in their time. It was not present truth in the days of Bethlehem. So, now brothers and sisters, we already trace the historical events that the Passover by which God's people celebrated on the second day of the feast, they presented before the Lord the worship offering, is the second section of the Exodus movement under the leadership of Joshua. And it is the fulfillment of Leviticus 23 verse 9, 10, 11, and 12 as stated in that verses. God Himself declared, when ye came into the land. So God knoweth beforehand that when they will enter the borders of Canaan, that is pattern number 2, by which the first day of the feast will fall on Sabbath. And that is why the verse says, tomorrow after the Sabbath, second day of the feast. Now, let us read Desire of Ages. Here in Desire of Ages, page 77. So let us read the statement. The Passover was followed by the 7 days feast of unleavened bread. On the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. All the ceremonies of the feast were types of the work of Christ. The deliverance of Israel from Egypt was an object lesson of redemption, which the Passover was intended to keep in memory. The slain lamb, the unleavened bread, the sheaf of first fruits represented the Savior. So this is the statement in Desire of Ages, page 77, saying, on the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest of the harvest, a sheaf of barley was presented before the Lord. And it is called the first of the first fruits. According to the old symbolic code. Now let us read old symbolic code. To symbolic code number 10, pages 8 and page 9. To symbolic code number 10, page 8 and 9. Now the quotation is Proverbs 3 verse 9, Exodus 22 verse 29, Deuteronomy 18 verse 3 and 4, Deuteronomy 26 verse 2, and Nehemiah 10 verse 34 and 35. And then it says, from these scriptures, we are not, however, to draw the erroneous conclusion that all of the first fruits are demanded by the Lord. God requires only an offering of the first fruits, as is proved by the fact of the wave sheep presented to the Lord before the individual could harvest his crop of first fruits. Leviticus 23 verse 10. So the wave sheep is the first of the first fruits. And the voice of inspiration says that, no, it is an erroneous idea that God demanded the entire first fruits. But rather, God requires only an offering of the first fruits. Because concerning the first fruits, it is Jesus Christ who will gather the first fruits. The entire 144,000 living saints. And I think it is familiar with all the obedience. Now, here in 2TG number 44, on page 37, it says, "The Son of Man therefore gathers the first fruits." 2TG 44:37. Because our subject is the ingathering of the 144,000. Who will gather the 144,000? Jesus Christ Himself, not us. And according to track number 3, on page, track number 3 on page 49, "At the former coming of the Son of Man, the stone which smote the great image was cut out without hands, without man's aid, and by the Lord Himself." Track number 3, page 49. So only Jesus Christ, without any human aid, without any human help, Jesus Christ gathers the 144,000 living saints. And the Shepherd's Rod admonishes us to have a better understanding concerning the ingathering of the 144,000. It says here in track number 8, page 12, "Better understand God's plan for the ingathering of the 12 tribes of Israel and for reuniting them in one great kingdom." So first of all, brethren, we need to completely realize that it is Jesus Christ who will gather the 144,000 living saints. That burden is not ours. It is Jesus Christ who will gather the 144,000 living saints. What we need to study is only in what way, how Jesus Christ gathered the 144,000 living saints. And first of all, we need to understand first, who are they? The first of the first fruits. I remember the statement in Timely Greetings. I would like to read this reading, saying, 1TG 23, page 9, "And how glad we ought to be for the privilege to be among the first of the first fruits." 1TG 23, page 9. So, what a wonderful privilege, or what an opportunity to be among the first of the first fruits. Now, in Old Symbolic Code, It says here, 9 Symbolic Code 1 to 12, page 7. 9 Symbolic Code 1 to 12, page 7. Let us all, as a Davidian band, remember that we are called to the high office and of conservators of the gospel, restorers of the old paths, repairers of the breach. We are called as the first of the first fruits from Laodicea, and thus we are to serve as saviors to Laodicea and of Laodicea. Now, of course, there are two prepositions used by inspiration. According to that reading, we the Davidian are called to be the first of the first fruits. And it says, to serve as saviors. Saviors from what? First, saviors to Laodicea. And saviors of Laodicea. There are two prepositions used, to and of. The preposition to always indicate the place. But the preposition of indicates ownership. For example, I would like to transpose that statement to America. Then that is pointing to the place. But if you will say of America, regardless of the place, as long as you are of America, that's what it means by the preposition of. So, to Laodicea must be pointing to the place. What is Laodicea? To the people declaring judgment. To the people declaring judgment. There are two people declaring judgment. The typical Laodicea declaring the judgment that pertains to the dead, and the antitypical Laodicea declaring the judgment that pertains to the living. But the preposition of Laodicea concerning condition, Laodicean condition, that whatever movement you belong, as long as you have that condition of Laodicea. What is the condition of Laodicea? Lukewarm. Regardless what place or wherever you are, as long that you have that condition of Laodicea, lukewarm, then you are of Laodicea. Now, let us go back to our main subject concerning the first of the first fruits. It is an erroneous idea that God demanded the entire first fruits. That statement must be applied more particularly in a spiritual aspect. not on the literal ceremonial services. Although the shepherd's rod declared clearly in track number 3, page 65, saying, so it must be with the spiritual harvest, which otherwise could not be illustrated by the literal. Do not regard lightly the wisdom of God. His illustrations are perfect. The illustration of Jesus Christ are perfect. Now, let us focus our attention, brethren, to the offering of the first fruits on the second day of the feast. And since that occurrence in the historical event, it was fulfilled, it was occurred on the second section of the Exodus movement, under the leadership of Joshua. Now, let me read to you here in Answerer number 3. It says here, on page 20 and 21, the movement led by the rod today is the only movement in Christendom fitting the type, the Israel of Joshua's day, like it drawing its followers only from the parent movement, and having as its threefold objective the deliverance of God's people from bondage, the possession of the land, and the establishment of the kingdom. And just as the purified Israel of Joshua's day, the generation which survived the 40-year wilderness wanderings inherited first the final leadership of the typical Exodus movement, and then the land of promise. So the purified Israel today, the 144,000, the ones who survived the 40-year period of wandering from 1890 to 1930 and who escaped the slaughter of Ezekiel 9 are to be promoted to the final leadership of the antitypical Exodus movement, then to inherit the promised land and to be citizens in the everlasting kingdom. Now, I would like to read again the admonition given by the shepherd's rod. Seven symbolic code, 7 to 12, page 19. 7 symbolic code, 7 to 12, page 19. We have learned much, and no doubt there is much more for us to learn. It is the follow-on and the go-through spirit that will finally land the remnant without fault, that will finally without fault on the heavenly Mount Zion. My conclusion is that we should give up no scripture truth, but that our false applications and interpretation of the scripture and consequent false ideas of order and propriety should be given up as fast as possible. Review and Herald, May 29, 1860. Now, we should not give up scripture truth. What is the scripture truth? That the purified Israel is the 144,000 living saints who survived after the 40 years wandering in the wilderness under the leadership of Moses. Now, B.T. Hotep places here 1930. Brothers and sisters, it is one of the false applications that we need to give up. Because if we will be saying that in 1930, the 144,000 living saints are already in existence at that time, and in the type, after the 40 years wandering, of course, the youngest must be 40 years old. Because wandering 40 years. Now, if that is already 40 years old in 1930, today is 2020. That is 90 years. 90 plus 40. Therefore, the youngest of the 144,000 today is 130 years old. 1 TG number 632. Truth is truth and sense is sense. Let us have them both. Now, let us now study closely to repeat again. The focal point is the 144,000 living saints. Under the second section of the Exodus movement, under the leadership of Joshua, by which the prophecy is pointing to the time when God's people observed the Passover week, by which the first of the first fruit is way before the Lord on the second day of the feast. Pattern number 2, April 16. Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. B.T. Hodop says, April 16 fall on Sunday. Now let us read Patriarchs and Prophets. 539. Patriarchs and Prophets 539. The Passover was followed by the 7 days feast of unleavened bread. The first and the 7th day were days of holy convocation, when no servile work was to be performed. On the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest were presented before God. Barley was the earliest grain in Palestine, and at the opening of the feast, it was beginning to ripen. A sheaf of this grain was waved by the priest before the altar of God as an acknowledgement that all was his. Not until this ceremony had been performed was the harvest to be gathered. Patriarchs and Prophets 539. Remember the statement, not until this ceremony had been performed was the harvest to be gathered. Since we are studying the ingathering of the 144,000, the ceremony mentioned here, what ceremony? The ceremony by which the wave sheaf is presented before God on the second day of the feast. So the situation is the same. Brothers and sisters, in 1490 BC, even before Moses died, it was already predicted by God that at the time when they will be in the borders of the promised land, they will celebrate the Passover, by which the sheep will be presented before the Lord on the second day of the feast, by which April 15 will fall on Saturday. And that is really what happened in 1451 BC. Exactly the words is specified in Leviticus 23 verse 9, 10, and 11. So also must be the antitype. I remember, let me see if I could find that statement, that God also, if the time is strictly observed in the type, it must also be in the antitype. Brothers and sisters, because God keeps accurate time, according to 1 SR 153. I would like to read first this statement. Our Savior has told us that not one jot or tittle of the law shall fail of being fulfilled. And the law can only be fulfilled in prophecy by the accomplishment of that of which the law was typical. Now, here's another statement. It says, thus exactly fulfilling the type, not only in the thing signified, but in the time. I would like to read again. Thus exactly fulfilling the type, not only in the thing signified, but in the time. And here's another statement. If the types had been fulfilled exact as to time, even to the hour, where that is known, will those that remain to be fulfilled will be less exact? I think not. God always has kept time in the fulfillment of the prophecies. And thus far, as we have seen in the types, He will not fail on us now. No, not. One jot or one tittle shall pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Now ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. God is the author of the scriptures. And God's work spell perfection. According to 1 SR page 232, it says, as God is infallible, all His works spell perfection, even to one jot or one tittle. 1 SR page 232. I know, I really feel, brethren, the reality of this statement in Testimonies for the Church, volume 7, 265. Let me read to you. It says, it requires a vast amount of time and labor to convince one's soul in regard to the special truths for this time. Volume 7, 265. It requires a vast amount of time and labor to convince one's soul in regard to the special truths for this time. But the time is running out. So, we will just try our best to make it short. But it need really vast amount of time, particularly to the Bible calendar. To repeat again, since there are only 7 days in a week, logically, there are only 7 patterns of Bible calendar. Let us show again the 7 patterns of Bible calendar. Pattern number 1, April 1, fall on Wednesday. Pattern number 2, April 1, fall on Saturday. Now that is not we have already an arrangement. All of them are April. April 1. Every pattern, 7 patterns. Now I would like to enumerate one by one, brothers and sisters. Okay. Now, this is the 7 patterns of Bible calendar. Pattern number 1, April 1, fall on Wednesday. Pattern number 2, April 1, fall on Saturday. Pattern number 3, April 1, fall on Tuesday. Pattern number 4, April 1, fall on Friday. Pattern number 5, April 1, fall on Monday. Pattern number 6, April 1, fall on Thursday. Pattern number 7, April 1, fall on Sunday. Then, every 7 years, the cycle go back to its pattern number 1. So that is the Bible calendar. Unlike with the Gregorian calendar, there are 14 patterns because the months are uneven. And also every 4 years is a leap year, by which February is 29 days. But we are studying prophecy to be reckoned by the Bible reckoning, by the Bible calendar. Now, brethren, we call this subject infallible proofs. Now, let me show to you first our diagram, pattern number 2. It is titled pattern number 2. So in that diagram, we project pattern number 2. Yes, pattern number 2. So in this diagram, pattern number 2, the Bible pattern by which the wave ship is presented before the Lord on the 2nd day of the feast. Now, look at this, brothers and sisters. 1451 BC, this is the type. 1451 BC. Make it bigger. So this is the type, 1451 BC. April 16, second day of the feast, the very first Passover in the leadership of Joshua. 1451 BC, after Moses died. The fulfillment of that statement in Leviticus 23, verse 9 to 12. Tomorrow after the Sabbath, which is Sunday, directly applied only to pattern number 2. And it is applied to all other patterns, but indirectly. Now, this year, brothers and sisters, why is it that it is May? (2022). Where is April 2022? I've been able to check up this diagram. Please take a pattern number 2, April. Because the October 2020, October 4, this is April 16, 2022. So, we need April 2022. The same pattern, this one. But this one is 1451 BC. You need April. April 2022. So, April 2022, Bible calendar, that is pattern number 2. Pattern number 2. And this April 2022, in Bible calendar, pattern number 2, April 16, in Gregorian, that is October 4, 2020. October 4, 2020. This coming October. On the second day of the feast, the wave ship is presented before the Lord. Now, the statement in Desire of Ages, page 77, let us read again. Desire of Ages, page 77. The Passover was followed by the 7 days Feast of Unleavened Bread. On the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. On the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. All the ceremony of the feast, inscribed in singular form. Feast. What feast? Passover feast. But what Passover feast? the Passover feast, by which on the second day of the feast, the first of the first fruits is offered before the Lord in the presence of God the Father. All the ceremonies were types of the work of Christ. So that is very plain, brothers and sisters. All the ceremonies were types of the work of Christ. Now the word all plainly indicating that from 1844, it will not be called all not until that predicted event that on the second day of the feast, the focal point, brothers and sisters, the last year of Christ's ministration on the holy place is pattern number 2. Because that is the statement, the work of Christ. And that is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. And the word all must be pointing to the last. So that is the last performance, the last ministration of Jesus Christ in the holy place. On the second day of the feast, the first of the first fruits are weighed or offered in the presence of God the Father. Now, I would like to read first track number 3. In track number 3 on page 72. Having to this point studied the judgment, the harvest, in the light of the testimonies of the prophets and the parables of Christ, we shall now examine it in the light of the ceremonial service. Why is it that it did not say in the light of the ceremonial services? It points out to the particular object in view. Just as the spirit of prophecy declares that the whole system of types and symbols was a compacted prophecy of the gospel, a presentation in which were bound up the promises of redemption, the Acts of the Apostles, page 14, just so the plan of salvation is unfolded not only in the testimonies of the prophets and in the parables of Christ, but also in the types and symbols of the earthly sanctuary. In addition to this, the experiences of the people in the typical period happen unto them, we are told, for examples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. 1 Corinthians 10:11. So we are logically bound up to the very outset to attend to God's instruction to Moses. So it says, brothers and sisters, to the symbols of the earthly sanctuary. But the fact is that we know that from the time of Joshua up to the first advent of Jesus Christ, they celebrated the Passover for many years. And for sure, they had been celebrated the Passover feast pattern number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then 1, then 2. But the absolute fact is that only pattern number 2 is recorded in the day Sabbath, on the second day of had been recorded. And that is pattern number 4, by which April 14 fall on Thursday. Now, ponder deeply, brethren. I would like to read to you track number 3. Track number 3 on page 78 and page 79. The wave sheep was to be offered on the morrow after the Sabbath, that is on the first day of the week, now commonly called Sunday. This offering was to be presented not on a special day of the month, but rather on a special day of the week, before the sickle was put to the grain and gathered into sheaves. Leviticus 23 verse 11 and 14. So the statement, before the sickle was put to the grain and gathered into sheaves, Leviticus 23, 11 and 14. Coming just at the right time in the season of the first fruits of the Passover week was the period in which the wave sheep was usually offered before the Lord, its ritual prophetically projecting Christ, the antitype of the wave sheep. For more than 1,000 years, the annual waving of the sheep pointed forward to its antitypical event, the resurrection of Christ. And as Christ arose on the very day that the wave sheep was to be offered, the day after the Sabbath, let no one attribute the singular concurrence of these two events on that day to mere coincidence or to any cause other than divine design. He was the antitype of the wave sheep, declares the spur prophecy, and his resurrection took place on the very day when the wave sheep was to be presented before the Lord. Desire of Ages 785. So what is the significance of the wave sheep? Resurrection. That is very plain. But the resurrection of Jesus Christ, brothers and sisters, is only a sample. According to Bible commentary, 6 BC, 1092, a sample of the final resurrection. The resurrection of Jesus was a sample of the final resurrection of all who sleep in Him. So that resurrection of Jesus Christ is only a sample, showing, brethren, that all the resurrection will be in the time of the presentation of the wave ship. But it is revealed by God by the mystical number 40. Not only the resurrection, but as well as Christ's mediatorial work in the heavenly sanctuary. Now, for example, brethren, I would like to read again the statement on track number 5. This is just an example. Page 74. It says, in track number 3, the harvest, the time from the baptism of Christ to the close of provision is illustrated by 12 figurative months. 6 from Christ's baptism to His crucifixion. 5 from the crucifixion to the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000. Track number 5, page 74. Then it says, leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. Revelation 7, verse 9. Now, the 5 symbolical months, it says, from Christ's crucifixion to the ingathering of the 144,000 living saints. Now, look at the divine code. I would like to 5 symbolical months, 5 symbolical months, crucifixion, to the ingathering of the 144,000 living saints. Ingathering of the 144,000. That is the 5 symbolical months. 5 symbolical months. But how about the 40 typical days? That is also in gathering. From Christ's resurrection to His ascension. 40 days. That is in gathering. Now, this statement and this must be in perfect harmony. And we will show to you that God perfectly portrayed the particular object in view. Brothers and sisters, let us read track number 3. Track number 3 on page 84. The reader will remember that those who arose with Christ on the 18th day of the first month, so that is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, were immortalized and received into heaven as the antitypical ship, pointing to the ingathering of the fruits that shall never die. Their resurrection from the dead signified the beginning of the first fruit harvest of the 120 disciples who were to die and be resurrected. The fact that the followers of Christ were not of one accord before the resurrection is very positive testimony that the first fruits, the 120 of them that sleep, did not ripen, become fully converted until after the resurrection. Ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. The 144,000 living saints, God gave 2 photographs, 2 pictures. Those that had been resurrected by Jesus Christ, as well as the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And also the 120 disciples. The type. The antitype is the 144,000 living saints. So let us now analyze closely, brothers and sisters. What date by which Jesus Christ was crucified? April 16. Jesus Christ was crucified on April 16. That is 31 AD, right? And that is the commencement of the 5 symbolical months. Track number 5, page 74. From the crucifixion. Now, in the predicted Passover feast, it is on the second day of the feast by which the worship is presented before the Lord. What is the date? April 16. Remember the statement that the first fruits cannot be gathered not until this ceremony were presented before the Lord. The first of the first fruits were offered in the presence of God the Father by Jesus Christ on the second day of the feast. What is the first day of the feast? April 15. That is the first day of the feast. April 15. Therefore, what is the second day? April 16. Therefore, when that predicted event, that on the second day of the feast, which is April 16, it has a double significance. That April 16, by which the worship is presented before the Lord, on the second day of the feast, also represents the crucifixion, because Jesus Christ was crucified on April 16. Now, let me show to you again our little diagram on the second day of the feast. Pattern number 2. This is 2022. April 16, on the second day of the feast. And ponder deeply, brethren, because we are nearing to the end. This pattern number 2, in Bible calendar, April 2022, will repeat again 7 years after. 2023 is pattern number 3, 2024 pattern number 4, 2025 pattern number 5, 2026 pattern number 6, 2027 pattern number 7, 2028 pattern number 1, 2029 pattern number 2. Therefore, it will repeat again on 2029 pattern number 2. So one of the significance, brethren, by the statement, there is time no longer, meaning there is no more other feast portrayed by inspiration except this year. Why this year? First, 2020 Gregorian calendar, that is 20 plus 20 equals 40. This is mystical number 40. There is no other year by which answer number 40 except this year. Next year, that is already 41. 2019, 20 plus 19, that is 39. There is no other year from 1844 that answers this mystical number 40, except this 2020. God revealed the truth right on time. Now, let us go back, brothers and sisters, to track number 3, page 86. On the first page of the 40 typical days on our diagram. 40 typical days. First page. Okay. Look at the divine formula given by God. Track number 3, page 86. The 40 days, Acts chapter 1, verse 3 and 9, from the resurrection to the ascension are consequently typical of the period from 1844 to the fulfillment of the marking and slaying as recorded in Ezekiel 9 and Revelation 7, 3 to 8, Revelation 14, 1 to 5 respectively, and in Testimonies to Ministers 445, Testimonies volume 3 to 66, also early writings to 70 and to 73. But let us deal first the first representation of the 40 days. Typical of the period from 1844. That is October 22. Now, you think that is just a mere happenstance? April 18, 31 AD, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place, 22. Then, April 18 plus 22, 18 plus 22 equals 40? No. It is purposive design because that's what it means by 40 typical days. That from Christ's resurrection to the time when Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place, the period from 1844, October 22, That is 40. 18 plus 22 equals 40. Bible calendar plus Gregorian calendar. Now let me show to you. Let us go back to pattern number 2. So this is the Bible calendar. The same procedure on that first page. Pattern number 2. April 16. How many days that had remained? 15. 7 plus 7, 14, then 30, 15 days. Then you need 25 to make it 40. Now, let us look at pattern number 4. Let us look at pattern number 4. April, pattern number 4. So this is pattern number 4. The wave ship is presented before the Lord on April 17. That is on the 3rd day of the feast. First day 15, second day 16. Or first day Friday, second day Saturday, then Sunday, 3rd day of the feast. April 17. Now, in Desire of Ages, let me read to you. If you still remember our reading in Desire of Ages, page 77, in the upper portion, it says, the observance of the Passover began with the birth of the Hebrew nation on the last night of their bondage in Egypt. When there appeared no token of deliverance, God commanded them to prepare for an immediate release. So that is the history. And when was that? According to 1SR, page 114 and 115. 1491 BC. Pattern number 4. And pattern number 4 will fall on April 14, 2020, April 17, 2024. Now let us look at April 17, 2024, Bible calendar. April 17, 2024. You see, that is September 25 in Gregorian calendar. Or in other words, that is mystical number 40. Now, let us place again April 2022 Bible calendar. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, then 30. So this is the predicted event by which the wave ship is presented before the Lord, or the first of the first fruits is way before the Lord, and it must be signified by 40. brothers and sisters, September 25, 2022, in Bible calendar, this is April 17, 2024. Sunday, this is the time by which the sheep is presented before the Lord. And look at, how many days remaining? 15. 15. Then plus 25 equals 40. The same in 1844. The remaining days from Bible to Gregorian calendar, that is 18 plus October 22 equals 40. Would you think, brothers and sisters, it is just a mere happenstance? It will never be repeated again. That April 17 in Bible calendar, in Gregorian, is September 25. Then we can rest assured that from the time when the sheep is presented before the Lord on April 16, 2022, by which in Gregorian calendar, this is October 4. Brothers and sisters, October 4, 2020, in September 25, 2022, Gregorian calendar, the 144,000 living saints are, all of them are gathered into Mount Zion, into one place. There is no doubt. September 25, 2022. Now let us go back again to pattern number 2. Our diagram, pattern number 2. So you see, brothers and sisters, this April 16, 2022, in Gregorian calendar, this is October 4, 2020, this coming October. Now, and this coming October 10, 2022, the last day of atonement in the holy place, which in Gregorian calendar, that is March 27, 2021. And you think it is just a mere happenstance? 13, brothers and sisters, the remaining days on April 18, 31 AD, also in 2019, or the remaining days in pattern number 6, 13 plus 27 equals 40? No, that is purposive design. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, the 11 talents mentioned in Matthew 25 is also representing the 11 antitypical 40 days. Plus 1, the typical 40 days, 12 in all. So, the 11 antitypical 40 days. And maybe in our next episode, we will enumerate one by one the 11 antitypical 40 days. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, the second day of the feast, for example, let us go to timeanddeath.com. April 16, 2022, the remaining days is 15. Therefore, it needs 25 to make it 40. Now, let us see April 17, 2024. That is the only year by which in Gregorian, that is September 25. And it is pattern number 4. What is the prediction given by Sister White in Desire of Ages, page 77? That is the time by which God's people will be an independent nation. And that is in the promised land. That is pattern number 4. Now, we need to look at another pattern number 4. April 17, 2031. You see, that is August 19. 15 plus 19, it is not 40. Another pattern, plus 2038. You see, that is July 13. 15 plus 13 equals 28. And it will repeat again, brothers and sisters, I think more than 1,000 years. So God controlled the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, by which through that calendar revealed the tremendous truths, infallible, the mystical number 40. Would you think, for example, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, 18 plus 13 plus 27. April 18, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. From His resurrection, there are 13 remaining days to complete the 30 days. May 27, that is the ascension of Jesus Christ. Then let us add 18, 13 plus 27, 8, then 5. 58. You know 58 AD? That is the year of Julian calendar. 31 AD in Bible calendar, in Julian, that is 58 AD. You think it is just a mere happenstance? No. It points out the responding calendar from Bible to Julian. And you think also it is a mere happenstance if you will multiply 5 times 8 equals 40? It's up to you, brethren. Because God revealed His truth in tremendous ways. In diverse ways, brothers and sisters. So, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, the 12 figurative months, the 40 typical days, the 12 parabolic harvest year, and the 40 typical days, as well as the 1,260 days, these 5 photographs reveal the entire truth in the judgment that pertains to the living. These 5 photographs. And the only portion that we explain today is concerning the production, second day of the feast. What a privilege then to be a part of the first fruits. This coming October 4, 2020, in Bible calendar, that is April 16, 2022. That is the very year, and the very day by which the predicted event that the first of the first fruits among the living will be presented by Jesus Christ in the presence of God the Father, brothers and sisters, and what a privilege to be among the first of the first fruits. We will continue this subject and hoping the good Lord will bless you. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. Have a wonderful evening.